What if I told you that everything you believe about life, about success, happiness, and purpose is a lie? What if the search for meaning is nothing more than a desperate attempt to escape the truth that life, at its core, is absurd? You wake up, go to work, chase dreams that may or may not even be yours. And one day, just like billions before you, you vanish. So what's the point? Should you embrace life as it is, savoring each moment without needing a higher purpose? Or should you reject reality as it is given to you, reshape it with your own hands, and carve meaning into existence itself? These are the questions that Albert Camus and Friedrich Nietzsche spent their lives trying to answer. Two minds, two radical perspectives. One tells us to accept and enjoy the chaos. The other demands that we conquer and transform it. Which philosophy is the key to true fulfillment? Which path will lead you to a life without regret? By the time you finish this video, you might look at the world and yourself in a way you never have before. So, before we dive in, take a second to smash that like button to help spread this conversation to more people who need it. Subscribe if you crave deeper discussions that challenge everything you thought you knew. And if you appreciate the content, consider dropping a super thanks. Every bit of support helps keep this channel going so we can keep exploring the big questions of existence. Now, let's get started. Albert Camus and Friedrich Nietzsche stand as two of the most compelling figures in modern philosophy. Their ideas, though vastly different, converge on one essential point: the confrontation with meaning, or rather, the lack of it. While many philosophers before them sought to establish meaning through logic, religion, or metaphysical frameworks, Camus and Nietzsche refused to accept the world as inherently meaningful. Instead, they urged humanity to face the unsettling reality that meaning does not exist outside of what we create for ourselves. But where Nietzsche fought against nihilism by advocating for the creation of personal values, Camus embraced absurdity, urging people to live despite the void. Nietzsche was not merely a philosopher. He was a revolutionary force, a thinker who rejected the foundations of Western morality and dared to ask, what if everything we've been told is a lie? He saw traditional values, especially those rooted in Christianity, as shackles that limited human potential. For him, the concept of an omnipotent God served as a crutch for the weak, an excuse to live passively rather than seizing life with full force. His famous declaration, "God is dead," was not a celebration, but a warning without a divine authority dictating morality. Humanity would have to find new ways to determine what is right and wrong. If people failed to do so, they would spiral into nihilism, a state in which nothing matters and existence feels pointless. To combat this, Nietzsche introduced the idea of the Übermensch, or overman, a person who rises above conventional morality and creates his own values. This overman does not seek validation from society. He defines himself through his actions and ambitions. On the other hand, Camus took a different approach. Unlike Nietzsche, he did not call for the destruction of traditional values. Instead, he focused on the absurd, the fundamental contradiction between human beings' desire for meaning and the universe's indifference to that desire. Camus illustrated this idea in his famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus, a character from Greek mythology, was condemned to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time he reached the top. His task was eternal, pointless, yet inescapable. Camus saw this as a metaphor for human existence. We search for meaning, yet none is given to us. We strive, we suffer, we achieve, and then we start all over again. The realization of this absurdity could lead to despair. But Camus insisted that we should do the opposite. We should embrace the absurd. Instead of giving in to nihilism or false hope, we should revolt by finding joy in the act of living itself. The tension between these two perspectives raises one of the most fundamental questions of human existence. If life has no inherent meaning, is it worth living? This is not just an abstract philosophical dilemma. It is a question that has haunted individuals throughout history. Consider the modern world. People wake up, go to work, earn money by things, and repeat this cycle indefinitely. Many do this without questioning why. Are they living meaningful lives, or are they simply fulfilling obligations placed upon them by society? A powerful example of this existential crisis can be found in the lives of successful yet deeply unfulfilled individuals. Robin Williams, one of the most beloved comedians of all time, made millions laugh yet struggled with severe depression. Anthony Bourdain, who traveled the world experiencing culture and cuisine, seemed to embody the idea of a well-lived life. Yet he too succumbed to despair. These tragedies highlight a harsh truth: achievement, wealth, and even passion are not necessarily enough to sustain a sense of purpose. When the illusion of meaning collapses, people are left with a terrifying question: what now? Nietzsche would argue that the answer lies in self-creation. Instead of looking for an external purpose, people must become their own sources of meaning. The overman does not wait for life to hand him a purpose. He chooses one. Consider someone like Elon Musk, regardless of one's opinion of him. It's undeniable that he does not follow a conventional path. He does not accept the world as it is. He strives to change it according to his vision. He does not seek meaning in pre-established systems, but builds his own. This is Nietzschean will to power in action. It is not about domination for the sake of control, but about the drive to create, to push beyond limitations, to forge something that did not exist before. Camus, however, would remind us that not everyone is destined to change the world on such a grand scale. And that is perfectly fine. His philosophy suggests that meaning is found in the simple act of living fully, embracing the absurd with a smile. He would argue that a barista who loves the craft of making coffee, an artist who paints despite not selling their work, or a person who finds joy in a quiet morning walk is just as triumphant as the overman. These people do not demand that life hand them meaning. They rebel against absurdity by choosing to find beauty in fleeting moments. But what happens to those who neither rise above conventional morality nor embrace the absurd? What happens to those who, realizing that meaning is not inherent, fall into despair? This is where Nietzsche and Camus warn us of the greatest danger: nihilism. Nietzsche feared that once people abandoned traditional beliefs, they would have nothing to replace them with, leading to a widespread collapse of purpose. He saw this happening even in his own time and believed it would only grow worse in the future. Camus, too, saw nihilism as a great threat, but he provided a different solution: acceptance, followed by defiant joy. This leads us back to a crucial question. If you knew that life had no grand, divine purpose, how would you live differently? Many people only start to contemplate this question when faced with mortality, when diagnosed with a terminal illness, when a loved one dies, or when they realize that time is slipping away. But why wait? Why not ask yourself now? Am I living a life that I will look back on with satisfaction? Consider someone like Steve Jobs, who famously asked himself every morning, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? If the answer was no too many times in a row, he knew he had to change something. This question is profoundly Camusian. It acknowledges the absurdity of existence, but forces an individual to make choices that affirm life. At the same time, it is Nietzschean in its demand that one actively shape their reality rather than passively accept it. The beauty of these two perspectives is that they are not mutually exclusive. One can, like Camus, recognize the absurdity of existence, while, like Nietzsche, striving to make something meaningful out of it. The key is not to fall into nihilism, but to engage with life as a creative force, whether that means pursuing ambitious dreams or simply savoring the experience of being alive. The final question remains: which path will you choose? Will you seek to become an overman, shaping the world in your image? Or will you embrace the absurd and live joyfully despite its lack of inherent meaning? Or perhaps, will you find a way to blend both perspectives, living fully in each moment while relentlessly pushing forward? The choice is yours. Albert Camus argued that life is a play without a script. Humans are born with an intrinsic desire to seek meaning, but the universe remains indifferent to that pursuit. This fundamental tension between human longing and the world's silence is what Camus called the absurd. The absurd is not simply about suffering or misfortune, it is about the realization that no divine plan, cosmic justice, or higher purpose exists to explain why things happen the way they do. Humans crave answers, yet the universe does not provide them. We look for order in chaos, but chaos persists. The confrontation with absurdity arises when we recognize this paradox and struggle with what to do next. Consider the experience of those who face terminal illness. When someone is diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, the immediate response is often, "Why me?" People want a reason for their suffering. They want to believe that their pain has a purpose or that it is part of some greater plan. But there is no answer. The universe does not offer explanations. It does not comfort or console. It simply is. Camus saw this as the essence of the absurd condition. Humans search for meaning in a world that is silent. Some turn to religion, hoping for divine intervention, while others fall into despair, feeling that without purpose, life is unbearable. But Camus rejected both of these responses. He argued that the only true way to face the absurd is to embrace it fully. If life has no inherent meaning, then what should one do? Camus proposed two possible responses: surrender or rebellion. To surrender is to either take one's own life or to live in a state of mental resignation, what he called philosophical suicide. Philosophical suicide occurs when people deceive themselves into believing in a false meaning, such as religious dogma or ideological certainty, to escape the confrontation with absurdity. Camus saw this as an act of cowardice. If one cannot bear the weight of meaninglessness, it may seem easier to pretend that meaning exists or to give up entirely. But he viewed this as a failure to engage with reality. Instead, he advocated for a third option: rebellion. To rebel is to recognize the absurd, yet choose to live in defiance of it. Camus believed that even if life has no ultimate purpose, it can still be worth living. The key is not to search for some universal meaning, but to create meaning through experience. He famously concluded the myth of Sisyphus by stating that one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Sisyphus, a character from Greek mythology, was condemned to roll a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down each time he reached the top. His task was eternal and pointless. And yet, Camus insisted that Sisyphus could still find happiness not in the completion of his task, but in the act of pushing the rock itself. The absurd hero does not ask why he must push the rock. He simply does it, fully aware of its futility, yet choosing to embrace the struggle. This idea has powerful implications for how we live our daily lives. If happiness does not come from achieving some ultimate goal, but from engaging fully in the act of living, then one does not need to seek meaning in grand external narratives. The artist who paints, not to sell a masterpiece, but because they love the process of creation, embodies this philosophy. The musician who plays, not for fame, but for the joy of playing, embraces the absurd. The teacher who finds fulfillment in the act of teaching, rather than the impact they may or may not have, lives in rebellion against meaninglessness. Even in the face of suffering, Camus argued that one could still find joy in the struggle itself. A striking real-world example of this idea can be found in the story of Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a psychiatrist who was imprisoned in the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He witnessed unimaginable horrors, lost his entire family, and faced daily brutality. Many prisoners, overwhelmed by the sheer meaninglessness of their suffering, lost the will to live. Yet, Frankl found a way to endure. He realized that while he had no control over his external circumstances, he could control his internal response. He chose to find meaning in the simple act of survival, in the ability to maintain human dignity even in the worst conditions. He helped fellow prisoners, observed the psychology of suffering, and later turned his experiences into man's search for meaning, a book that has inspired millions. Frankl's Resilience was an embodiment of Camus' rebellion, facing the absurd and choosing to live anyway. This kind of rebellion is not about optimism or hope in a traditional sense. Camus did not believe in false hope, nor did he advocate for a naive kind of happiness. He did not say that suffering has a higher purpose or that everything happens for a reason. Instead, he suggested that even if life has no meaning, we can still create our own joy by living fully and embracing the present. The absurd hero does not wait for a revelation. They act despite the lack of one. One might argue that this approach is passive, that it lacks the drive to change the world. But Camus did not advocate for resignation, he advocated for engagement. Living in rebellion against the absurd does not mean accepting oppression, injustice, or cruelty. In fact, Camus saw rebellion as a powerful force for change. If we accept that there is no ultimate justice in the universe, then we have an even greater responsibility to create justice ourselves. If there is no inherent purpose to life, then we must build lives that feel meaningful on our own terms. Think about the people who dedicate themselves to causes despite knowing that their efforts may not change the world in the long run. A climate activist fights for environmental protection even though they may not see the results in their lifetime. A doctor treats terminally ill patients knowing that they cannot save them, but can still provide comfort. A writer pours their soul into a novel, even if it never gets published. These people are all modern Sisyphuses, pushing the rock up the hill not because they believe they will reach the top, but because they choose to engage with life in a way that affirms their existence. This perspective is particularly relevant in the modern world, where many people struggle with a sense of purposelessness. In an age of information overload, social media addiction, and consumer culture, people often chase after fleeting distractions to avoid confronting the void. They seek validation through likes, followers, and material success, believing that these things will give them meaning. But Camus would argue that external achievements cannot provide lasting fulfillment. Meaning is not something to be found, it is something to be lived. A practical way to apply Camus philosophy is to focus on process over outcome. Instead of asking, "What will this lead to?" ask, "Am I fully present in this moment?" Instead of measuring success by external validation, measure it by how engaged you are with what you're doing. This does not mean that goals and ambitions are meaningless, but rather that they should not be the sole source of purpose. If you write because you love writing, you are already victorious. If you love playing basketball, whether or not you win a championship is secondary. If you find joy in a deep conversation, you have already found something valuable. There is also a certain freedom in this philosophy. If there is no ultimate purpose to life, then there are no rigid rules for how to live it. There is no single path to success, no one way to be happy. Some may find fulfillment in adventure and risk-taking, while others may find it in quiet introspection. Some may dedicate themselves to activism, while others may simply enjoy the beauty of a sunset. The key is not to seek meaning, but to experience life as fully as possible. The absurd is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. It is an opportunity to live without illusions, to see the world as it truly is, and to still choose to engage with it. Camus' philosophy is ultimately one of defiant joy, a refusal to let the absence of meaning diminish the beauty of existence. Instead of seeing life as a tragedy because it lacks a script, one can see it as a work of improvisation, where the act of creating itself is the reward. This is the challenge Camus presents to us. Knowing that life is absurd, will you still choose to live it? Will you find joy in the struggle, or will you give in to despair? The answer is not given, it is something each individual must decide for themselves. Nietzsche rejected the idea of living in a meaningless world. He saw nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent purpose, as a grave danger, not because it was incorrect, but because it threatened to paralyze humanity. If there is no preordained meaning, no divine plan guiding human existence, then people might be tempted to see life as futile. But Nietzsche argued that this realization should not lead to despair. Instead, it should inspire us to become creators of our own values. Unlike Camus, who accepted absurdity and found joy in rebellion against it, Nietzsche saw the absence of inherent meaning as a challenge to be overcome. For Nietzsche, the greatest individuals were those who refused to be defined by external values and instead impose their own meaning onto life. This difference in perspective is crucial. Camus would look at the absurdity of life and say, "Fine, I will enjoy it anyway." Nietzsche, on the other hand, would say, "No, I will bend reality to my will." While Camus celebrated the act of living despite meaninglessness, Nietzsche demanded that we rise above it and create meaning where none exists. He saw the passive acceptance of absurdity as a form of weakness. To him, the highest virtue was not happiness or contentment, but strength, the ability to impose one's will onto the world. This led him to one of his most famous ideas, the will to power. The will to power is Nietzsche's answer to nihilism. He did not believe that people should simply seek happiness. He saw happiness as a byproduct of achieving greatness. True fulfillment does not come from passive pleasures, but from the struggle to reshape the world in accordance with one's desires. This is why Nietzsche admired figures who, rather than accepting the world as it is, sought to change it. He believed that greatness was reserved for those who had the courage to reject societal norms and create their own systems of value. Consider the story of Elon Musk. No one told Musk that humanity needed to colonize Mars. There was no divine commandment or societal expectation pushing him in that direction. But Musk decided that this was the meaning he wanted to give his life. He did not wait for someone to tell him that space exploration mattered. He declared that it did. This is Nietzsche's philosophy in action. Musk embodies the idea that meaning is not something you find, but something you make. He does not let conventional limitations define him. Instead, he sees obstacles as challenges to be overcome. This same principle applies to all highly successful individuals. Steve Jobs did not follow market trends, he created them. Oprah Winfrey did not accept the limitations placed upon her. She redefined what was possible for a woman of color in the entertainment industry. Jeff Bezos did not wait for someone to tell him that e-commerce would revolutionize shopping. He saw a future that others did not. These individuals are not simply reacting to the world. They are imposing their vision onto it. Nietzsche's will to power is about more than ambition. It is about the drive to create, the refusal to live as a passive participant in someone else's story. He saw society as a force that often promotes mediocrity, rewarding conformity instead of originality. To break free from this, one must be willing to challenge authority, reject the status quo, and become their own master. Nietzsche's ultimate goal was the creation of the Übermensch, or the Overman, a person who transcends conventional morality and defines their own existence. The Overman is not merely successful in a material sense. They're not just wealthy, famous, or powerful. Instead, they create their own values rather than inheriting them from religion, culture, or tradition. They do not seek approval because they do not need it. They recognize that morality, truth, and meaning are not universal laws, but human constructions. And if they are human constructions, then they can be reconstructed by those with the will to do so. This is a radical idea. Most people live according to rules they never questioned. They accept moral values that were handed to them by society. They believe in traditions simply because they were born into them. Nietzsche called this herd mentality the tendency of the masses to follow without questioning. The Overman, by contrast, does not follow. He leads. He invents. He creates. Take the example of Kanye West. Love him or hate him, it is undeniable that he refuses to conform to expectations. He does not seek permission to express his vision. He demands that the world pay attention. This is the Nietzschean spirit. West does not wait for the world to validate his greatness. He asserts it with absolute conviction. Whether one agrees with him or not is irrelevant. What matters is that he operates on his own terms. Nietzsche's philosophy is not just for the elite. It is not only about billionaires, artists, or world leaders. It applies to anyone who refuses to be dictated by outside forces. A teenager who decides to pursue music instead of going to law school because that is their passion is exercising their will to power. A single mother who builds a business from nothing, despite everyone telling her she will fail, is embodying the Overman spirit. A scientist who challenges the accepted theories of their field and proposes something revolutionary is walking in Nietzsche's footsteps. But there is a danger in this philosophy. If taken to the extreme, the will to power can become arrogance, egotism, or even tyranny. History is filled with examples of leaders who pursued power for its own sake, believing themselves to be superior to those around them. The Overman is not simply someone who seeks domination. True power is not about controlling others. It is about mastering oneself. It is about the ability to act without fear, to create without hesitation, to live authentically without seeking approval. A common misconception about Nietzsche is that he celebrated cruelty or oppression. This is not true. He did not believe in mindless domination. He believed in self-overcoming. The greatest battles are not fought against others. They are fought against one's own weaknesses, fears, and limitations. The true Overman is not a tyrant, but a creator. Someone who does not need to destroy others in order to rise. This is why Nietzsche's philosophy is both empowering and terrifying. It forces people to take full responsibility for their own existence. There is no divine plan to fall back on. No external force dictating what is right or wrong. If you fail, you cannot blame fate, destiny, or society. You can only blame yourself. But if you succeed, that success is entirely yours. There is no safety net in Nietzsche's world, only freedom. This is what makes Nietzsche so compelling. He does not offer comfort. He does not offer certainty. He does not promise that everything will work out. Instead, he demands that you stand on your own feet, that you stop waiting for permission, that you seize your own life with both hands and mold it according to your will. So the question is, are you willing to create your own meaning? Are you willing to break away from what you have been told and forge your own path? Are you willing to accept that nothing is given and that everything must be taken? If you are, then you're already walking the path of the Overman. If you're not, then you must ask yourself what's stopping you. And more importantly, who told you that you couldn't? Camus and Nietzsche offer two radically different approaches to dealing with the absurd nature of existence. Camus tells us to embrace life as it is, without needing a grand purpose to justify it. He sees joy in the mere act of living, in appreciating the simple pleasures of existence. A sunset, a conversation, the feeling of the wind on your face. These moments, however fleeting, are enough. He argues that we do not need to search for an ultimate meaning because the search itself is futile. The universe does not provide answers, and waiting for them is pointless. Instead, the best thing we can do is to fully engage with life in the present. Nietzsche, on the other hand, does not believe in accepting reality as it is. For him, mere acceptance is a sign of weakness. Those who resign themselves to the meaninglessness of existence are simply avoiding the responsibility of creating something greater. He sees the absence of inherent meaning as an opportunity, a blank slate upon which the strong can impose their own vision. In Nietzsche's world, you do not simply live, you conquer life. You do not let existence dictate the terms of your reality. You define your own terms. He despises those who accept life passively, calling them part of the herd, people who lack the will to rise above mediocrity. These two perspectives offer starkly different views on how one should live. Camus would tell you that it is enough to enjoy the absurd ride of life with all its ups and downs. While Nietzsche would insist that being is not enough, you must do, create, and push beyond the limits imposed on you. Camus' philosophy finds beauty in the moment, in fleeting joys, in the rebellion of simply refusing to despair. Nietzsche's philosophy finds beauty in struggle, in the pursuit of power, in becoming something more than you were before. Imagine two different people applying these philosophies in the modern world. One person, following Camus, decides that they do not need to climb the corporate ladder, chase endless promotions, or achieve greatness by society's standards. They find contentment in their daily experiences, appreciating their relationships, passions, and small victories. They work not for status, but for the sake of the work itself. They drink coffee in the morning and actually taste it, rather than rushing to the next task. They laugh with their friends, not because laughter serves a greater purpose, but because laughter is enough. Now, take another person who follows Nietzsche's path. This individual refuses to accept mediocrity. They push themselves, set ambitious goals, and view life as a challenge to be won. If they're in an unfulfilling job, they don't make peace with it, they change it. If they feel restricted by societal norms, they break them. If they fail, they do not wallow in self-pity, but use failure as fuel to come back stronger. They do not simply exist, they demand more. Both approaches have their strengths, but both also have potential dangers. Camus philosophy, if taken too far, can lead to a passive existence. If one is too focused on simply enjoying life as it comes, they may never strive for more. They may become complacent, using the idea that life has no meaning as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Someone who could have built something great may instead decide to do nothing at all, choosing comfort over challenge. They might avoid difficult conversations, abandon ambitions, and let their lives drift without direction, telling themselves that there is no point in trying. Nietzsche's philosophy, on the other hand, can become dangerously extreme. The relentless pursuit of power and self-overcoming can lead to arrogance, detachment, and even cruelty. Those who are obsessed with imposing their own can start to believe that they are superior to others. They may dismiss those who find joy in simple things as weak or unworthy. In its worst form, Nietzsche's ideology can justify domination, with the strong see it as their right to impose their will on the weak. History is filled with figures who embodied Nietzsche's philosophy in a destructive way: tyrants, dictators, those who believed that their vision was the only one that mattered. Take someone like Steve Jobs, brilliant, relentless, but also notoriously difficult. He did not simply accept life as it was. He bent reality to his will. He demanded perfection, pushed people beyond their limits, and refused to settle for anything less than his vision. His approach led to some of the most revolutionary technological advancements, but it also made him feared and, at times, disliked. He was, in many ways, a Nietzschean figure driven, ambitious, and unwilling to accept mediocrity. But one might ask, at what cost? Was his genius worth the personal sacrifices he made? Now contrast that with someone like Mr. Rogers, the television host known for his kindness and gentle wisdom. He did not seek power, nor did he impose his will on others. He lived by Camus' philosophy, embracing life with warmth, focusing on human connection rather than personal ambition. He did not need to change the world through force. He changed it by simply being fully present in the world, offering kindness in an absurd universe. This contrast forces us to ask, which path is better? Should one strive to be great, to build, to create something extraordinary? Or should one embrace life's fleeting joys, finding meaning in small moments rather than grand achievements? The answer depends on the individual. Some people thrive under Nietzsche's philosophy, using it as a source of motivation. Others resonate with Camus, feeling that life is best lived in the present rather than in pursuit of an ever-elusive goal. Perhaps the most interesting approach is to combine the two. One does not have to only accept life as it is, nor does one have to only struggle to change it. Maybe the best way forward is to recognize when to fight and when to simply enjoy. There are moments when Nietzsche's drive is necessary, when you need to challenge yourself, step out of comfort, and demand more from life. And there are moments when Camus acceptance is the wiser choice, when you need to let go of control, savor the present, and appreciate what already exists. Many people unknowingly embody both philosophies at different points in their lives. A young entrepreneur might start with Nietzsche's mindset, pushing against limits, refusing to accept conventional paths. But later in life, after achieving success, they might shift toward Camus' view, realizing that happiness is not just an achievement, but in being. A parent might initially be focused on building a career, but later, watching their child take their first steps, they might understand the beauty of simply existing in the moment. So, the real question is not which philosophy is correct, but rather, which philosophy is right for you right now? Are you in a stage of life where you need to fight, to push, to redefine your existence? Or are you in a stage where you need to pause, breathe, and appreciate the absurd beauty of life as it is? Neither approach is inherently right or wrong. It is a matter of knowing when to apply which perspective. At its core, this debate between Camus and Nietzsche is about what it means to live well. Camus tells us that life itself is enough, that even in a meaningless universe, we can find happiness in the simple act of living. Nietzsche tells us that life is not enough, that we must shape it, force it to be something greater than it is. Camus says, enjoy the absurd. Nietzsche says, destroy the absurd and build something new. Some people will resonate more with one than the other. Some will alternate between them. Some will struggle with both. Ultimately, how you interpret their philosophies depends on what kind of life you want to lead. Do you want to be a warrior, constantly fighting against limits, striving for greatness? Or do you want to be a wanderer, embracing life's mysteries, finding joy in what is rather than what could be? Perhaps the most profound realization is that you do not have to choose just one. You can fight when the battle is worth fighting, and you can accept when acceptance brings peace. The key is knowing when to do which. Both Camus and Nietzsche were, in their own way, rebels against the traditional ways of thinking. Camus rebelled by refusing to despair. Nietzsche rebelled by refusing to accept anything less than total transformation. Their philosophies are not just intellectual exercises, they are blueprints for how to live. Whether you choose to embrace life as it is or shape it into something greater, the important thing is that the choice is yours. Camus challenges the idea that we need a grand, overarching meaning to justify our existence. He tells us that the universe is indifferent, that there is no divine plan, and that searching for some ultimate purpose is a futile endeavor. But rather than seeing this as a cause for despair, he sees it as an opportunity. If life has no preordained meaning, then we are free to live however we choose. This freedom, however, can be daunting. Without an external guide telling us what we are supposed to do, how do we avoid drifting aimlessly? How do we make choices without feeling like they are arbitrary? The key, according to Camus, is to stop searching for some abstract, universal meaning and instead focus on the meaning found in everyday experiences. Many people fall into the trap of believing that they need to discover a higher purpose to feel fulfilled. They think that meaning must come from something grand, an extraordinary career, a lasting legacy, or a deep spiritual revelation. But this pursuit often leads to frustration. What if they never find that one thing they are meant to do? What if they dedicate their lives to a goal, only to realize that it does not bring them the fulfillment they expected? This is where Camus philosophy provides a powerful alternative. He suggests that instead of chasing a singular, ultimate purpose, we should embrace the small, fleeting joys that life offers. Imagine a painter who spends hours working on a canvas, completely absorbed in the process. He does not ask himself, what is the grand meaning of this painting? He paints simply because he loves it. The act of creation itself is fulfilling. He does not need the painting to become famous or to carry some deep existential message. The moment of painting, the colors blending on the canvas, the sensation of the brush in his hand, these are enough. This is Camus philosophy in action. The painter is not waiting for life to give him meaning. He is creating meaning in the moment. The same applies to many aspects of everyday life. A chef does not need to revolutionize the culinary world to find joy in cooking. A parent does not need to raise the next world leader to find meaning in raising their child. A runner does not need to win a marathon to experience the exhilaration of movement. Camus encourages us to stop obsessing over some distant, ultimate goal and instead ask, does this moment matter? Am I engaged in what I'm doing right now? Am I fully alive? If the answer is yes, then that is enough. In a world that constantly pressures people to be more, achieve more, and prove their worth, this perspective is revolutionary. Society often tells us that our value is determined by our accomplishments, by our career success, by how much money we make, by whether we leave behind a lasting legacy. But Camus reminds us that meaning is not something external. It is something we cultivate within ourselves. If we always measure our lives against some far-off objective, we will miss the richness of the present. This is especially relevant in today's culture, where social media creates the illusion that everyone else has found their true calling. We see people traveling the world, starting businesses, or making an impact, and we start to wonder if we're missing out. We feel pressured to find our passion, to identify our purpose, and to pursue it relentlessly. But what if passion is not something to be found, but something to be experienced in the present moment? What if purpose is not a destination, but something we create through our daily actions? There's a kind of freedom in letting go of the need for a grand purpose. If life is absurd, if it lacks inherent meaning, then we're not bound by the expectations of others. We do not need to prove ourselves to an indifferent universe. We are free to engage in what brings us joy, not because it serves some higher goal, but because the experience itself is worthwhile. This brings us to another crucial part of Camus philosophy, embracing the absurdity of existence not with despair, but with laughter. If the universe does not care about us, if life is ultimately meaningless, then why take everything so seriously? Why stress endlessly over things beyond our control? Why not laugh at the absurdity of it all? Robin Williams, one of the greatest comedians of all time, captured this idea perfectly. He once said, "Life is a comedy to those who think." He understood that the best way to deal with life's unpredictability, its chaos, and its indifference was to find humor in it. Rather than becoming bitter or cynical, he chose to laugh. This is exactly what Camus meant when he spoke of rebellion against the absurd. Instead of letting the meaningless nature of existence weigh us down, we should dance in defiance of it. This does not mean we should ignore suffering or pretend that life is easy. Camus was not advocating for blind optimism. He acknowledged that life is often painful and unjust. But he also believed that even in the face of suffering, we can choose our response. We can wallow in despair, or we can find moments of joy despite it. Think about a time when you were in a difficult situation. Maybe you were stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting, and everything seemed to be going wrong. In that moment, you had two choices. You could get angry, curse the world, and let frustration consume you. Or you could take a deep breath and laugh at the absurdity of it all. The first response does nothing to change the situation. It only adds to your misery. The second response allows you to let go, to accept what you cannot control, and to move forward with a lighter heart. Camus would argue that this is not just a small coping mechanism, it is a profound way of living. Life is full of unexpected events, of absurd twists and turns. We can spend our time resenting them, or we can choose to embrace them. A broken plan, a lost opportunity, an awkward moment, these are all part of the strange, chaotic dance of existence. Rather than resisting, we can laugh, adapt, and continue moving forward. In a larger sense, this philosophy applies to how we approach major life events. Imagine someone who loses their job unexpectedly. They could see it as a devastating failure, a sign that their life is falling apart. Or they could see it as an absurd twist in the story, an opportunity to do something new. Camus philosophy encourages us to take life's unpredictability and strive to see setbacks not as tragedies, but as part of the absurd game we are all playing. This perspective can be incredibly liberating. When we accept that life is chaotic and that meaning is not something we discover, but something we create, we stop living in fear of failure. We stop obsessing over whether we are on the right path. We stop comparing ourselves to others and start focusing on what makes us feel truly alive. One of the most powerful ways to apply Camus philosophy is to stop taking everything so seriously. Of course, this does not mean being irresponsible or indifferent. It means recognizing that much of what we stress over status, expectations, perfection is ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It means allowing ourselves to make mistakes, to take risks, and to enjoy life even when it does not go according to plan. A person who embraces this philosophy might wake up each morning and instead of thinking, "What is my purpose today?" they might simply think, "How can I make today enjoyable?" They might try something new, not because it will lead to a major breakthrough, but just because it seems interesting. They might engage in conversation, not because they need to impress someone, but because they genuinely enjoy the interaction. They might pursue hobbies, not because they will make money from them, but because they bring joy. Camus philosophy is ultimately about choosing to live despite the absurdity of life. It is about finding joy in the present rather than seeking some unattainable grand purpose. It is about understanding that we are free to define our own experiences, to laugh at the unpredictability of life, and to embrace the beauty of existence without needing it to be anything more than what it is. When we let go of the need for absolute meaning, we make room for something even better, the ability to fully experience life in all its absurd, fleeting wonder. Nietzsche rejects the idea of accepting fate. He does not believe in passively waiting for life to unfold, but instead urges individuals to take control of their existence and forge their own destiny. In a world where many people feel trapped, whether in dead-end jobs, societal expectations, or personal doubts, his philosophy provides an alternative. Instead of conforming, one must create. Instead of following, one must lead. Instead of waiting for meaning, one must impose it upon life. But how do we apply this in practice? How do we break free from the structures that limit us and become the architects of our own lives? Too often, people wait for permission to act. They look for guidance, approval, or a predetermined path that guarantees success. They seek validation from their parents, society, or institutions, hoping that someone will tell them, "This is what you should do." This hesitation stems from fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping outside the safety of what is known. Nietzsche despised this mentality. He saw it as a symptom of the herd, the masses who blindly follow rules, traditions, and expectations without ever questioning them. To him, the true individual is one who rejects given values and creates their own. Consider the countless people who remain in jobs they hate. They wake up dreading the workday, yet they stay, convincing themselves that this is simply how life works. They tell themselves that they have bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, and no alternative but to endure it. But Nietzsche would argue that this is a self-imposed prison. If a person truly despises their circumstances, why do they not change them? The common response is that change is risky, uncertain, and uncomfortable. But Nietzsche believed that only through discomfort can greatness emerge. He challenged individuals to ask themselves, are you living the life you want, or are you merely surviving? Breaking free requires destroying old structures and creating new ones. If you hate your job, do not just complain, build a different path. If you feel trapped by societal expectations, rewrite the rules for yourself. This does not mean recklessness. It means taking ownership of your existence. People often look at entrepreneurs, artists, or innovators and assume they were simply lucky or gifted. But the truth is, they refuse to accept the constraints placed upon them. Steve Jobs did not wait for someone to tell him that the world needed the iPhone, he created it. J.K. Rowling did not wait for approval to become a writer. She wrote despite rejection after rejection. These individuals did not ask for permission. They acted. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or overman, is at the heart of this philosophy. The overman is not a perfect being. He is someone who constantly overcomes himself. Nietzsche did not believe in absolute perfection, nor did he think that greatness was something achieved once and for all. Instead, he saw life as a continuous process of self-overcoming. The overman does not compare himself to others, he compares himself to who he was yesterday. The only true competition is with oneself. Take someone like Kobe Bryant. He was not satisfied with simply being a great basketball player. He pushed himself relentlessly, studying opponents, refining his skills, and outworking everyone around him. He did not settle for what was good enough. He demanded excellence from himself every single day. This is the mindset of the overman, never stagnant, never complacent, always reaching for something greater. He was not driven by external validation, but by an internal hunger to be better than he was the day before. This same mentality applies beyond sports. Think about Elon Musk. Instead of accepting the status quo of electric vehicles, space travel, or artificial intelligence, he challenged reality. He refused to believe that things had to remain as they were. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, these are not products of someone who played by the rules. They're the result of someone who looked at what was possible and decided it was not enough. Musk embodies Nietzsche's will to power, the drive to reshape the world rather than be shaped by it. But applying this philosophy does not require becoming a billionaire or a world-class athlete. It applies to anyone who refuses to accept mediocrity. A high school student who decides to start a business instead of following a traditional career path is embracing the will to power. A person who takes control of their health and fitness, refusing to be limited by excuses, is living as an overman. A musician who experiments with new sounds instead of conforming to industry expectations is embodying Nietzsche's ideal. It is not about what field you are in. It is about whether you are creating or merely consuming. The most dangerous trap is comparison. Many people measure their success based on others, how much money they make, how many followers they have, how prestigious their title is. But Nietzsche would say that this is irrelevant. The question is not how you compare to someone else, but how you compare to your past self. Have you grown? Have you challenged yourself? Have you improved? The overman does not seek external validation. He does not care if society approves of him because he sets his own standards. Self-overcoming also requires facing hardship. Nietzsche did not believe in avoiding struggle, he saw it as essential. Growth comes from resistance. Think of a weightlifter. Muscles only grow when they are pushed beyond their comfort zone. The same applies to the mind and spirit. People who avoid difficulty, who seek comfort at all costs, remain stagnant. But those who embrace struggle, who lean into discomfort, emerge stronger. This is why Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Pain is not something to be feared. It is something to be transformed into power. Many people misunderstand Nietzsche's philosophy, thinking it promotes selfishness or arrogance. But the true overman is not someone who dominates others. He is someone who masters himself. Power, in Nietzsche's sense, is not about control over others. It is about control over one's own mind, desires, and fears. A person who needs external approval is not powerful, they are dependent. A person who is driven by their own vision, regardless of what others think, is truly free. This also means rejecting victimhood. Nietzsche despised the mentality of blaming society, blaming parents, blaming circumstances. He believed that no matter what challenges a person faces, they still have the power to rise above them. Life is unfair, obstacles exist, but dwelling on injustice does nothing. The overman does not waste energy complaining, he channels it into action. This philosophy is empowering, but also terrifying because it means that there are no excuses. If your life is not what you want it to be, Nietzsche would say, change it. If you're not where you want to be, work harder, think smarter, and push forward. The world owes you nothing. No one is coming to save you. The responsibility for your existence is entirely in your hands. So how do you apply this in daily life? Start by asking, am I living according to my own values? Or am I following a script written by someone else? If you realize you're merely conforming, then rewrite the script. If you feel stuck, then break the cycle. Take risks. Try new things. Challenge your beliefs. Every day, ask yourself, am I better than I was yesterday? If the answer is no, do something about it. The Overman is never finished growing. He does not seek comfort, he seeks greatness. He does not wait, he acts. He does not look for meaning, he creates it. If life has no inherent purpose, then that is not a tragedy, it is an opportunity. The question is, what will you do with it? Camus and Nietzsche, despite their differences, share a common goal: to combat nihilism. Both reject the idea that life is inherently meaningful in the way religion or traditional philosophy suggests, but neither accepts despair as a valid response to this realization. Instead, each offers a solution. Camus tells us to embrace life as it is, finding joy in the moment, while Nietzsche urges us to impose our will upon the world, shaping it in our own image. One tells us to accept, the other to create. One tells us to find happiness in rebellion against meaninglessness. The other tells us to transcend meaninglessness altogether. At first glance, these seem like opposing views, but in reality, they can work together, offering a more complete way to engage with existence. Nihilism, in its rawest form, is a disease of the modern mind. It is the feeling that nothing matters, that no purpose exists, that life is just an endless cycle of actions with no ultimate significance. Some people fall into passive nihilism, where they give up, resigning themselves to an existence of going through the motions without real engagement. Others fall into active nihilism, where they attempt to destroy existing values out of frustration, but without offering anything to replace them. Camus and Nietzsche both saw this problem and sought to address it, albeit in different ways. Camus' solution was to accept absurdity but live fully despite it, while Nietzsche's was to reject absurdity and create a new framework of meaning. A simple way to think about their approaches is through a metaphor. Imagine life as a vast, empty landscape. A nihilist, confronted with the emptiness, might sit down and do nothing, overwhelmed by the lack of direction. Camus, however, would say, this landscape may be empty, but you can still walk, explore, and enjoy the journey. Nietzsche, on the other hand, would say, why accept the emptiness? Build something. Shape the landscape to your will. Camus' solution is to find peace in the absurd. Nietzsche's is to overcome it entirely. Take someone living in modern society who feels lost. They go to work, come home, scroll through social media, binge watch shows, and repeat the cycle every day. They might feel like they're simply existing rather than truly living. This is the condition that both philosophers address. Camus would say, stop looking for a grand purpose and start engaging with life directly. Find joy in simple moments of conversation with a friend, a great book, the feeling of the sun on your skin. Don't worry about whether it means anything, just experience it. Nietzsche, by contrast, would say, if you feel lost, it's because you're following a life designed by others. Break free from the script society has given you and create a life that reflects your own desires. Set goals, challenge yourself, and strive for greatness. These perspectives are not mutually exclusive. In fact, a well-lived life requires both. There are times when one needs to embrace life as it is, without seeking deeper meaning. This is Camus' influence. There are other times when one needs to challenge the status quo, push boundaries, and create meaning for oneself. This is Nietzsche's influence. Recognizing when to apply each perspective is key to living a balanced and fulfilling life. Imagine someone who is deeply unhappy in their job. They wake up every morning dreading the workday, feeling as though they are wasting their potential. A purely Nietzschean approach would be to quit immediately and pursue something bold, perhaps starting their own business or moving to a new city in search of reinvention. A purely Camusian approach would be to find joy in the daily experience of work, appreciating small interactions, the rhythm of routine, and the simple pleasures of daily life. But the best approach might be a combination. Embrace Camus in the short term, finding meaning in the present moment, but adopt Nietzsche's mindset in the long term, actively working to build a better future. This balance applies to relationships as well. Some people search endlessly for the one, believing that a perfect romantic partner will give their life meaning. Camus would say, stop chasing an ideal and start enjoying real relationships, flaws and all. Love is not about ultimate fulfillment, but about shared experiences in the present. Nietzsche, on the other hand, would say, do not settle. If a relationship does not push you toward growth, if it stifles your ambition or dulls your passion, leave it behind and seek something greater. Again, both approaches can be useful depending on the situation. Sometimes, you need to appreciate what you have, and other times, you need to seek something better. The same applies to self-improvement. A purely Nietzschean mindset might push someone to relentlessly chase perfection, constantly striving for self-betterment at the cost of ever feeling satisfied. A purely Camusian mindset might lead someone to accept themselves as they are and stop striving altogether. The best approach is to appreciate the present while still striving for growth, to find joy in the process, rather than fixating only on the result. This is why many successful people practice mindfulness while also setting ambitious goals. They recognize that true fulfillment comes from both experiencing the now and building toward the future. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch encourages people to transcend their limitations and become something greater, while Camus' absurd hero encourages people to live fully in the face of an indifferent universe. One tells us to reach beyond what we are. The other tells us to embrace what we already have. If taken to extremes, both philosophies have potential dangers. Too much Nietzsche can lead to constant dissatisfaction, arrogance, and a disregard for others. Too much Camus can lead to passivity, complacency, and a lack of ambition. A healthy balance means knowing when to fight against limits and when to enjoy life as it is. Think of the greatest artists, athletes, and thinkers. They often embody both philosophies. Michael Jordan did not accept mediocrity. He pushed himself beyond limits, embodying Nietzsche's will to power. But he also found joy in the game itself, living fully in each moment of competition, which aligns with Camus' emphasis on experience. A writer like Haruki Murakami follows the discipline of Nietzsche, writing every day with relentless dedication, but also embraces Camus' mindset by finding peace in the daily act of creation rather than obsessing over external success. Every person will find themselves in different seasons of life where one philosophy is more useful than the other. If you feel stuck in routine, overwhelmed by the pressures of success, or exhausted by ambition, Camus' perspective can help you slow down, appreciate life, and let go of the need for ultimate meaning. If you feel uninspired, stagnant, or lost in aimlessness, Nietzsche's philosophy can push you to break free from old patterns, challenge yourself, and take control of your future. Neither philosophy is universally correct. Rather, both offer tools that can be applied in different contexts. The key question to ask yourself is, are you living according to your own principles, or are you letting others define your life? Camus would tell you that if you are enjoying the present, if you are engaged in life's small pleasures, then you are already winning. Nietzsche would tell you that if you are constantly pushing forward, evolving, and refusing to be defined by external forces, then you are living well. The best approach is to find a way to integrate both mindsets, to be present but also driven, to accept but also to challenge, to embrace life as it is while still working to create something greater. Ultimately, the philosophies of Camus and Nietzsche do not have to be opposites. They can be two sides of the same coin. Camus reminds us to live fully despite absurdity, while Nietzsche challenges us to create meaning in defiance of it. The best way to live is to recognize when to accept and when to change, when to find joy in the moment, and when to strive for something more. Life is not about choosing between them. It is about knowing when to apply each philosophy to maximize the richness of your existence. Camus and Nietzsche present two radically different ways of living, yet both offer profound insights into how we engage with the world. Choosing between them is not simply an abstract philosophical exercise. It is a decision that influences every moment of our daily existence. Do you embrace the absurdity of life and find meaning in the present, as Camus suggests? Or do you refuse to accept reality as it is and forge your own destiny, as Nietzsche demands? This question is not theoretical. It is deeply practical. It affects how you wake up in the morning, how you approach challenges, how you pursue goals, and how you make peace with the fleeting nature of existence. For those who resonate with Camus, the goal is not to conquer life, but to experience it. Life, in this view, is not a ladder to climb, but a river to flow with. There is no final destination, only the journey itself. A Camusian approach means letting go of the need to justify existence and instead finding joy in the small, everyday experiences. Imagine waking up in the morning and instead of worrying about whether your life is on the right track, you simply savor your first sip of coffee, enjoy the feel of the morning air, or immerse yourself in conversation with a friend. You do not need a grand narrative to make life worthwhile. The mere fact that you are here, alive, breathing, experiencing is enough. This perspective is liberating because it removes the pressure to always be achieving something greater. Too often, people live as if they are on an invisible treadmill, always running toward the next goal, but never stopping to appreciate where they are. They believe that once they get the promotion, buy the house, start the business, or accomplish some long-term objective, they will finally feel fulfilled. But as soon as they reach one milestone, another appears on the horizon. Camus reminds us that this chase is endless and that true satisfaction does not come from reaching a final goal, but from being fully present in each moment along the way. Think about the people who are happiest in their lives. Often, they are not the ones who are the most successful by society's standards. Instead, they are those who have learned to appreciate what they have while they have it. A musician who plays not for fame, but because they love the sound of their instrument. A writer who writes, not for recognition, but because they're captivated by the act of storytelling. A barista who takes pride in making the perfect cup of coffee, not because it will bring them status, but because they find joy in the ritual of creation. These are all examples of people living according to Camus' philosophy, finding meaning in the absurdity of existence, not through external validation, but through direct engagement with life itself. On the other hand, Nietzsche would call this acceptance a form of weakness. He would argue that while it is fine to enjoy the moment, true greatness requires creating meaning rather than simply embracing it. He would push you to ask, are you truly living, or are you just existing? Are you shaping the world, or are you letting it shape you? Nietzsche saw the passive enjoyment of life as something reserved for those who lack the will to rise above their circumstances. Instead of simply experiencing life, he would urge you to dominate it, to carve out your own path, and impose your own vision onto the world. This does not mean Nietzsche encourages mindless ambition or blind materialism. Rather, he challenges people to refuse to live according to someone else's script. If you're working a job you hate because society tells you it is the responsible thing to do, Nietzsche would say you are wasting your potential. If you have dreams and ambitions but are too afraid to pursue them, Nietzsche would say you are letting fear dictate your life. He would argue that instead of finding comfort in the absurd, you should rise above it, impose your own meaning onto existence, and refuse to accept the limits others place upon you. Look at some of the most transformative figures in history: Leonardo da Vinci, who refused to be confined to a single discipline; Steve Jobs, who did not settle for mediocrity, but instead changed the world of technology; Kanye West, who disregarded musical conventions and redefined entire genres. These individuals did not simply accept life as it was given to them. They remade it. They lived as Nietzsche's Übermensch, constantly evolving, rejecting complacency, and refusing to let external forces dictate their paths. But this path is not easy. Nietzsche's philosophy requires struggle. To impose meaning onto a meaningless world is a relentless task, one that demands discipline, courage, and an unbreakable will. Unlike Camus' approach, which allows for contentment in the present, Nietzsche's path offers no rest. The pursuit of greatness is ongoing, and those who follow this path must always push forward. So which path is right for you? If today were your last day on Earth, would you be satisfied simply enjoying the moment, or would you regret not having done more? This is the fundamental question. Camus' philosophy is perfect for those who want to find peace in the absurd, who wish to stop chasing after meaning and instead immerse themselves in life as it unfolds. Nietzsche's philosophy is perfect for those who cannot stand passivity, who feel an internal drive to achieve something greater, to impose their will on the world, and to leave behind something meaningful. The truth is, both approaches have their time and place. Some days, it is wise to live like Camus, to let go of worry, to laugh at the absurd, to enjoy life without constantly trying to force it into a structure. Other days, it is necessary to live like Nietzsche, to break free from constraints, to refuse to settle for mediocrity, and to push beyond your limits. The key is knowing when to embrace each philosophy. If you feel overwhelmed by the pressures of life, expectations, deadlines, the feeling that you must constantly do more, try living like Camus for a day. Let go of the need for a grand purpose and simply experience life. Savor your food. Take a walk without thinking about where you're going. Have a conversation without trying to make a point. See if you can find joy in the act of living itself, without the need for an external justification. If you feel stuck in a cycle of monotony, if you feel like you're drifting through life without direction, try living like Nietzsche for a day. Set a goal. Push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Do something bold, something that scares you. Take action that aligns with your highest vision of yourself. Refuse to let fear or doubt hold you back. Nietzsche believed that people become great by constantly striving, by never allowing themselves to stagnate, by always reaching for something beyond themselves. If you feel like you're simply going through the motions, perhaps it is time to force yourself to grow. Ultimately, the choice is not about picking one philosophy and rejecting the other. It is about understanding both and using them as tools. There are moments in life when acceptance is necessary, and there are moments when rebellion is necessary. Sometimes, you need to step back and simply enjoy what you have. Other times, you need to fight against complacency and demand more from yourself. The balance between Camus and Nietzsche is not about choosing between them. It is about recognizing when each approach serves you best. So ask yourself, are you living fully in the present? Or are you chasing an illusion of meaning? Are you embracing the absurd? Or are you trying to conquer it? Are you letting life happen to you? Or are you making life happen? There's no right answer, only the answer that is right for you at this moment. The challenge is to live deliberately, to make each day a conscious choice rather than a passive experience. Whether that means savoring life as it is or shaping it into something greater, the decision is yours. So, now you stand at a crossroads. On one path, you have Camus, the voice that whispers, "Stop searching for something that isn't there. The universe doesn't care about you, and that's okay. Laugh at the absurdity of it all. Find joy in the moment, even if it's fleeting." On the other, you have Nietzsche, the fire that roars. Do not accept life as it is. Bend it to your will. If meaning doesn't exist, then create it. Become more than you are. Destroy weakness. Rise above. The choice is yours. Are you someone who finds contentment in savoring life as it comes? Or are you someone who is driven to reshape your destiny at any cost? Do you embrace the absurd, or do you fight against it? There is no universal answer, only the answer that is right for you, here and now. But don't just sit there thinking about it. Live it. Test it. Tomorrow, when you wake up, choose how you will face the day. Will you take a deep breath and simply exist in the moment, enjoying the absurdity of it all? Or will you set a challenge for yourself, break free from a limit, and impose your will on the world? Whatever you choose, let me know in the comments. Are you a Camus, a Nietzsche, or something in between? I read every comment, and I want to know how you see life. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, show some love, hit that like button, share this with a friend who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more mind-blowing discussions. And if you'd like to support this channel, consider donating through Super Thanks. Every contribution helps keep this content coming. Thank you for watching, and remember, life is either something you accept or something you create. The choice is always yours.